Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode 2 of the Corcoran Cap, the podcast where we talk 49ers, A's, Warriors, Syracuse, and just have a ton of fun on it. I am your host, Sam Corcoran, and we are starting off with the most painful segment of this episode for this week, the 49ers. And Rohith, my co-host, first of all, how are you doing today?
Honestly, better than it was yesterday. 24-hour rule. If it's a win, celebrate the win for 24 hours, move on. If it's a loss, mourn for 24 hours, move on. And now, with the Niners season's over, it's time to move on. We got to look at the offseason.
Exactly. Time to move on, look at the offseason. But first, you know what? It's going to be a painful episode because we're going to recap the game. Even though we all kind of want to forget it, I think it's something that has to be done. We'll just look at some pros and cons. Let's just start with some positive stuff from this game. Let's just look at some positive stuff. And I want to bring up a few things. So first of all, Deebo Samuel. I mean, this dude is unreal. You could make a solid argument. I tweeted this out. I was talking with friends about it. You can make a solid argument that Deebo Samuel is the best football player in the world right now.
You legitimately can't make an argument for the fact that he's probably the best football player of this season.
Personally, yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. Personally, I think he is the best offensive player. I would still give the nudge to Aaron Donald for best defensive player, but I think Deebo Samuel, he's definitely a top 5, if not top 3 football player currently in the world. So that's one pro. I think overall, I think the receiving game did very well. You had a few good plays. It was really those two guys. You didn't really see much of Jawan Jennings. You didn't really see much of in the run game either. It was really just Deebo really controlled the game. You had Ayuk doing stuff here and there. Kittle had a few targets. He didn't do too well, but I mean, obviously
he still had the touchdown in the third.
He did. Yes, he did. That was big. So Kittle, obviously, I mean, he's one of the best tight ends in football right there. Obviously contributing in the blocking game. He actually made a few mistakes. I think his blocking game was worse. And we'll talk about the blocking game and the offensive line a little bit later. Defensively, I thought this defense played very well against a Rams team who has always, I mean, the Rams team has always just been one of the most underrated offenses in football. And you look at this Rams team and 20 points back to back. I think there was 20 points for the last time the Niners played them too, something around there, or it was 24. It was something in the 20s. So definitely this Niners D you have a lot to be happy with going forward after this game. This Niners D is locked and loaded. Yeah, you have to get some free agents back, but it's not as bad as last year where the entire defense was basically a free agent. And on top of that, D'Amico Ryans is coming back for another year, which is huge.
I think that's probably the biggest thing because that continuity matters, especially when it comes to your coaches and your coordinators. I mean, yes, the 49ers are a very, they're a pretty damn good organization nowadays. It's not like where we were at the end of 2014 with the 2015 mass exodus and everybody leaving, and then how absolutely awful that team was for those next 2 seasons before we brought in Shanahan and Lynch. It's not like that anymore. Everybody wants our guys. And the fact that we're able to keep one of them, that's going to be massive.
Exactly. Just being able to keep one of the coordinators. I think Mike McDaniel, from what I've heard, he's going to take the Dolphins job. So I think that's fine. I know I saw someone put out Clay Kubiak, which could be a good move. But yeah, I think overall the offense, I mean, the coordinator situation is definitely very good looking in the next year.
Yeah.
But now let's talk about some cons for this game. And Rohith, how about you start this one off? Give us one con to talk about.
I think this all starts and ends with the quarterback position. I think we have to start with Jimmy Garoppolo. And
exactly.
I think we have to
No, go ahead.
Oh. But I think we have to start with Jimmy Garoppolo and typical erratic play. And we saw that with the missed throw to Kittle on that very first possession that the Niners had, or he missed Kittle a bit high because he saw the underneath linebacker. He tried to put it in a place where only Kittle could get it. Ball sailed on him, incompletion. That was the first 3 and out. And honestly, if Garoppolo puts that ball better on Kittle, there was a good chance that was going to be like a 75-yard touchdown.
He could have been gone. He totally could have been gone after that.
Yeah, I mean, and that's just one of the mistakes from Garoppolo. A lot of times there were a lot of just like those typical Jimmy throws where it's just like, what are you doing? What were you thinking? What were you seeing?
Oh yeah, it's classic Garoppolo, and we got that game. I mean,
Yeah.
to be frankly honest, I actually do think this was his best performance in the playoffs, but that's not really saying that much. I mean, you had that throw to Ayuk, which looked sloppy, and you know what? It's probably his last snap as a 49er. So we'll talk about that a bit later, probably if we have time. But overall, quarterback play was definitely one thing, and something that I think that influenced that quarterback play. Elijah Mitchell and the offensive line did not step up, especially the offensive line in the last drive. One of the last plays of the game, in that final drive where we had the ball, the offensive line just let 3 guys just blow right past them, and Garoppolo was in trouble. Garoppolo was in trouble for all of the last 3 plays. He had to get rid of that ball. You're going to lose yards. He probably shouldn't have. He probably should have just tucked it in. But still, I mean, it's really hard to like get down the field and drive down the field when the game's on the line if your offensive line is not going to protect the quarterback.
Yeah.
So overall, the offensive line has to step it up. And ironically, the offensive line gets rewarded by getting 2 more Pro Bowlers named, Laken Tomlinson and Alex Mack. But you know what? They did have good seasons, let's be fair, but they did not step up when they needed to. And you look at the All-22, it was mainly the right side of the line, Brunskill and Compton. So, I mean, it's tough, but the offensive line as a whole needed to step it up.
Everybody who covers the Niners has been discussing that right side of the offensive line. If something was going to break, if something was going to happen, it was going to happen to that right side of the offensive line, and that's where almost everything fell apart.
Exactly. It almost fell apart, and it kind of did fall apart towards the end. So those are really the 2 cons that I have. And let's talk more about Elijah Mitchell, because Elijah Mitchell did not really do well. The run game in general, the Rams did a fantastic job at stopping that. And I think that was more the Rams stopping it than the Niners just not succeeding, because the Rams knew exactly what to do. So credit to them, credit to Sean McVay. And you know what? They were the better team this game, and they deserved to go to the Super Bowl, in my opinion. Even though it was a fun run for the Niners, but you know what? You couldn't get it done in the end. I honestly, personally did not expect this team. If you told me this team was going to make the NFC Championship back after the Cardinals game or the Colts game, I would have laughed in your face. To make the NFC Championship, to beat Green Bay in Green Bay, a game where I thought we had no shot of winning, and then to go in LA, obviously, you know, there's the home crowd narrative, but still. No, I think someone tweeted out, no team has beat 3 straight 12-plus win teams. The Niners did that on the road. Or no 12-plus win teams on the road. The Niners did that. The resilience that this team showed was remarkable. And I think everyone at the end of the day should just be proud of this team.
Yeah, but at the same time, it's hard. Like, you have all this perspective, but at the same time, it's kind of hard, especially for like some of the fans, for them to just be like, because in another way to put it in perspective, we've made it to 5 of the last 11 NFC championships, and we don't have a single Lombardi trophy to show for it.
Yeah.
To put it in context, Seattle made 2 NFC championships in a row in 2013 and 2014. Obviously, they won Super Bowl 48 back in 2013. They haven't made it back since. But having that Lombardi trophy, it's some sort of like validations of justification of all the efforts that have been put in. And
exactly.
It honestly makes the other failures hurt less. I mean, Kansas City, they've made it to the last 2 Super Bowls, obviously winning the one against us. And obviously losing sucks, but for them, at least they have that Lombardi trophy from 2 years ago. It's something recent that they can at least say, like, hey, we made this happen. So for them, it can hurt a bit less. I mean, yes, every loss is unique. Every season is unique. Like, losing sucks, but at least there's something there. And the Niners have been lacking that something. So at least for the fans, like seeing this over and over again, like it eventually starts wearing on you.
Exactly. So overall, I mean, I think, losing sucks. It's that simple. But at the end of the day, it was a magical run for the Niners. And now the Jimmy Garoppolo era is over. It's now the Trey era, whatever you want to call it. But now it's time. I think this team is going to be a lot better next year. And we'll talk about that in a later episode. We'll talk about that as the offseason progresses on and we get closer to the 2022 season. But let's talk about probably the biggest con of this game. And something that's going to haunt all of us is Jaquiski Tartt dropping that pick.
Here we go.
And I mean, that is just in my nightmares. That's probably the most haunting 49ers. I didn't think it would get worse than the Kyle Williams drop, but that was worse in my opinion. That seriously, and here's why I'm going to blame this game on Jaquiski Tartt. After he dropped that, first of all, let's just get the obvious out of the way. After he dropped that, the momentum stopped. Yeah. But also after he dropped that, the Rams drove down the field and kicked a field goal. If he catches that ball, the Niners' entire game.
We don't drive yet. The very next play, Jimmy Ward gives up a 30-yard pass to Odell Beckham Jr. and then tacks on an unnecessary roughness penalty. That's 45 yards of field position flipped after the first play after the drop pick. It just starts there, and then it just snowballs.
Exactly, yeah. And I think after, not only that, so the Rams drove down the field and scored. If Tartt catches that, the entire Niners game plan changes. You can run out the clock. You're in Rams territory, basically. You can get into Rams territory, get a field goal. Now it's a touchdown. The Rams have to drive down the field, get a touchdown, or the Niners could have even scored a touchdown and sealed the game. So overall, here's the thing with a ton of Niners fans on Twitter, and you guys know who you are if I'm talking to you. So many people have been standing Jaquiski Tartt this year that they refuse to believe that he's responsible for this game. And all I have to say to that is just get out of your heads, because I guarantee if a guy like Dante Johnson dropped a pick, you would be blaming it on Dante Johnson. And honestly, it's just like, I don't know. I'm not going to go too much into it because the people know who they are. But honestly, you just really have to. I mean, personally, if you don't want to blame it on Tartt, go ahead. But don't say that Tartt didn't change this game, because that absolutely changed this game.
Yeah, no, I agree. Like, I agree if someone says it wasn't solely Tartt's fault, but I will not agree if someone just tries to outright absolve him of blame. That's just flat out wrong.
Yeah, and I would say
to be made, he blew it. He blew it. Like, simple as that. You can't really argue that, but you can argue the other semantics around it, then maybe you might have a point. But if you're trying to argue that drop pick was not significant, what are you doing?
Yeah, no, that definitely changed the game. Like, someone tweeted out the other day. I forget who it was. Who was it? I don't even need to say it. But he basically said, like, oh, it doesn't matter because if Tartt drops that, the Rams are going to score anyways. If Tartt catches it, the Rams are going to score anyways. No, they're not, because they don't have the ball. Exactly. It's that simple. And I'm not going to, I found out who it was. But this guy
didn't even have any timeouts.
Yeah, exactly. No timeouts. The Niners are going to seal the game. I think a lot of people are just forgetting what's going on. So, yeah. All right. Last thing. We have a few more minutes left. What is next for the 49ers? And by that, I mean, what's the next thing this team does? Is it going to be get a new offensive coordinator because we think McDaniel's gone? Is it going to be a Garoppolo trade? Is DeMeco Ryans? I mean, I think he's staying. Is there any other coaching staff moves we have to do? Or are we just going to wait till free agency, maybe try to lock some players up? Or are we going to make another trade here? What do you think's next, Rohith?
I honestly don't know. Plus, I've also been hearing some things about maybe Alex Mack or Sarah might be considering retirement. So, like, we still maybe have to look in-house about that as well. And that goes back into our whole offensive line thing, where I think ultimately as a whole, this offseason has to start with an emphasis on the offensive line. Football,
exactly,
especially the way that the 49ers want to play football, is won and lost in the trenches. We lost this past game in the NFC Championship in the trenches. We couldn't get consistent pressure on Matthew Stafford. We only sacked him twice in the entire game. We only hit him about 10 times. The entire Niners offensive line was terrible, allowing pressure near the entire game. It got worse in the fourth quarter. The run blocking wasn't there. This game is won and lost in the trenches, and I think this entire offseason, there has to be an emphasis on the offensive line, especially if Trey Lance is going to start taking the reins.
Exactly.
Because you want some decent offensive line play, especially if you want to help those longer developing plays that the Shanahan offense is known for. Like we saw in Atlanta, the whole the long ball shot plays that you normally associate with the Shanahan offense. If you want to see that, it has to start with the offensive line.
I like that. I do like that because I think a lot of people are looking ahead at Garoppolo getting traded, which will probably happen. But I think addressing the offense line is the biggest need. You have Tomlinson and Brunskill, free agents, and we're running out of time, so I'm just going to make this point really quickly. I think personally the 49ers should not bring back Laken Tomlinson. I think that's too much money, and you have Aaron Banks sitting right behind him, who, out of college, many scouts compared to Laken Tomlinson. So overall, I think you have a left guard on your team that can replace Laken Tomlinson. But we're going to talk about this more in episodes down the line when free agency comes up. We'll make sure to break down each position. But anyways, that's going to do it for this 49ers segment. Coming up, staying in the Bay Area, talking about the Golden State Warriors all-star selection, a few game recaps you won't want to miss out, so stay tuned. Welcome back. Segment number 2 on episode 2 of the Corcoran Cap, talking about the Golden State Warriors. I'm your host, Sam Corcoran, and joined by my co-host, Joel Pettit. Joel, I know you're a bit of a COVID struggle for you. How's that going? How you been this week?
It's the reality of life right now. COVID's everywhere, especially, I'm assuming it's Omicron. Just making do. I have it much better than most people, so not too bad.
Exactly. I mean, it is what it is, but you know what? Warriors always going to put everyone in a good mood. If you have COVID, listen to this, obviously. Listen to just this, the Warriors segment. It's always going to be good. Cheer up. And let's start off with some big news that happened this week. You had let's start with the All-Star starters, because this episode, we're recording this episode. It'll come out when the rest of the team is named. Yes. But the starters have already been named. Andrew Wiggins and Steph
All-Star Curry. All-Star Wiggy, and Steph.
I think in the thumbnail, I have Andrew Wiggins in the thumbnail, and the Warriors title is All-Star Andrew. So there you go. Joel, what are your thoughts on Andrew Wiggins being an All-Star starter? Was it deserved?
I'm going to address this. Everyone is shaming the selection on social media. Everyone is just trolling because it's the toxic 10-year-old Warrior fans that are getting him in. Listen, the amount of, because it's front court, so you have to be a forward or a center. The amount of front court players that have missed substantial time or have just not played this year in the West is staggering. You've got Zion. You've got Michael Porter Jr. You've got Paul George. You've got Anthony Davis. You know, those are guys that you would think get serious all-star consideration if they're healthy and they're out. So that already limits the playing field. I see Suns fans complaining about Booker and Paul not making it, which, yes, I think it's a little weird that the team with the best record in the league doesn't have an all-star starter, but you can't get mad at Wiggins being in and them not. The two main guys that I think had a serious bid to be in over Wiggins are Karl Anthony Towns and Rudy Gobert. And now with all-stars, we've seen this with Trae Young and Bradley Beal. No, we've seen it with Trae Young starting, not Bradley Beal. Being on a terrible team, putting up big numbers. Not to say the Timberwolves are terrible. They're roughly a 500 team. I am all in for praising Wiggins. I think he's been really consistent. His defense is great. The efficiency's improved. He's over 40% on threes. Do I think that if I were a Jazz or Timberwolves fan, would I be upset? Yes. But I don't think it's as absurd as a lot of people are making it out to be. And Steph, obviously, despite the struggles as of late, it's him and Ja. We all knew those were the two best guards in the West, and it's
yeah. And I know Booker. The argument with Booker is that, I mean, he's better than Wiggins. Probably is, but he's not better than Ja and Steph. So I don't think there was a shot he was making it.
No.
Wiggins, on the other hand, I mean, to be fair, I don't think he should have been a starter, but he should have been an all-star.
He definitely deserved to make it.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. The fan voting, I think the fan voting just jacked his stock up. And you know what? It is what it is. The other guys are going to get minutes too. I wouldn't be surprised if a guy like Paul George or a guy like Kat or Jokic is starting, Jokic
is starting. And Paul George has just there's a good chance we don't see Paul George again this season, in my opinion. That Clipper season is trending downwards, and it
is. Yeah. But I think overall, you're looking at, Wiggins might not even play the most minutes.
No.
I bet there will be some guy on the bench that's going to get more minutes.
And at the end of the day, Monty Williams is the all-star coach, so there's a chance he played. Maybe Paul because he's older, but there's a chance he plays Booker.
It's Monty Williams and who? Because it's still Team Durant versus Team LeBron, I'm pretty sure.
Oh, I don't know how all-star coaching
it would be the leader in the East, so maybe Spoelstra or maybe even Steve Nash, because maybe that's when the Nets were still in first.
Okay, well, it depends on whose team is who, because we have to remember it's a draft format. But
exactly.
At the end of the day, people also don't necessarily remember who is a starter in the All-Star game and not. People just remember when you make the All-Star game. Paul and Booker are going to make it. Wiggins deserved to make it, and he made it just as a starter. So 5 years from now, we're just going to remember, oh, Wiggins made it. That's cool. And you know what? the two best players on the best team in the NBA also made it. So I think people are making a little too big of a fuss over this.
Absolutely. And then there's an argument that Draymond Green has been better than Andrew Wiggins this season. And first of all, let's just put it out there. Draymond Green will be an all-star. By the time this is out, it should be announced that he's an all-star. Even though he's been out for a while, though, so you might have someone replace him, but he should be named to the all-star roster, personally, in our opinions, and I'll be shocked if he doesn't. Joel, do you agree that Andrew Wiggins is worse than Draymond Green, or are people right that Draymond's the better forward?
It's a different.
Or wait, is Draymond or Wiggins the better forward? I phrased it the same way, but whatever.
It's
continue.
A difficult comp because I think with Draymond, it's so beyond the stats of what he gives to everyone as a leader, of calling out defensive rotations, of being, I think this is not a very hot take, the best defensive player in the NBA as far as versatility. Either him or Giannis as far as just versatility. I mean, Wiggins has been so consistent as a scorer and so needed as a scorer. I mean, him being penciled in for high teens, low 20s every night is so valuable, especially with us not having Clay at the start of the year. I think that I would say Draymond is a better player, but I think considering that he's missed time and I think this is the best. Wiggins, especially as of late, this is the best basketball he's ever played. I think to this point, simply when you look at the games played, I would say Wiggins is having a better year. But I really don't think there's much of an argument for him being a better player than Draymond. And reputation matters because players and executives and stuff vote for all-stars. And Draymond does, and at the very least should, he should, and I bet he does, have the respect of that to get himself in. He's been too good for too long to get discarded.
Exactly. Personally, I think overall, when you look at the impact that both players have had on this season, I think Draymond has had the more impact, but then you look at it on paper, and I think Andrew Wiggins is looking better on paper. And I think they both provide different things. Draymond is definitely more of a defensive guy, where Andrew Wiggins is more of an offensive guy. So it depends on what you're really looking for in those two players. But personally, I think I'd give the slight edge to Andrew Wiggins. I think he definitely deserved it over Draymond Green, in my opinion, to make the starting lineup. At least if you had to rank the Warriors starting lineup, it would be Curry 1, then you have the Grand Canyon, then Wiggins 2, Draymond 3, 4. You're gonna go with Clay at this point, and 5 Looney. Maybe you switch Looney and Clay, but
we'll also Clay, as we mentioned the last time, getting better and better. He had the huge shot in the Brooklyn game. He was, I don't remember what game it was, but it was against Minnesota. He was fantastic against Minnesota. And then it's just, I think as time will show that Clay just is getting back into the groove. And I mean, I think finished with a not exactly eye-popping stat line in this last game. And again, the Brooklyn game, he and Steph struggled at the end, but obviously came up big when it mattered most. But I think that, the Warriors have 4 all-star caliber guys when in the flow and healthy in their starting lineup with Steph, Clay, Wiggins, and Draymond. I think seeing obviously Clay isn't going to make it, and seeing as we have the second best record in the NBA and Draymond's contributions on defense, I think he has the best individual defensive rating in the NBA. I don't know if we're still the best defense in the NBA. It would be amazing if we still are.
I don't think we are, personally.
But I think part of that has to do with the fact that Draymond has been out the last couple of weeks.
Exactly. And I want to let's just tap into the defense real quick.
Yes.
And this is where we're going to start the game recap thing. Looking at the past few games for the Warriors have actually been very well. 96 against one of the top teams in the East, the Chicago Bulls. This is from January 14th.
Oh, that was a statement win.
That was a statement win, especially after losing to Milwaukee.
On the back end of back-to-back, yes.
Exactly. Back-to-back, Kuminga dominated that game. That was a statement win. 86 against Detroit. I mean, not too impressive. 103 against Houston. Could have done better. 92 against Utah. 92 against Dallas. 115 against Minnesota, who is a playoff team. 106 against
Minnesota has got how many guys? They have Russell, Towns, Edwards,
Anthony Edwards.
Easily. Those are 4 guys that can go for 20 in a game. It's 20 plus.
Yeah, definitely. And I think you also have Brooklyn. I mean, it's not the same, but I think that's pretty good. And then Houston last night, 108. Joel, let's get into the Houston game. You want to start with some thoughts on it real quick?
Well, I would personally like to thank Kevin Porter Jr. for having the balls to poke the bear that is Stephen Curry. He had his career high for points in a fourth quarter with 21 last night. He absolutely carried us down the stretch, and he's getting a well-deserved rest tonight as he had to put in a lot of energy. He usually gets a break at some point in the fourth. He didn't. He just completely carried us to the end. Wiggins was really solid, had 17, I believe, in the first half, finished in the mid-20s. He kept us in it. Poole, pretty quiet. He only took 4 shots, did have 5 turnovers, which I didn't like, but he wasn't forcing any bad shots, and he did hit 2 threes that did come at pretty big parts. Clay, mixed game. The shooting numbers weren't great, but he did have a couple of decent drives, and he started off the game really well. I think he hit 3 of his first 4 or 4 of his first 5 shots.
Exactly.
One of the most undersung heroes and of this team, especially as of late, with Wiseman obviously not being back yet, Bjelica missing the last couple of games, Draymond, who we play as a small big, is Kevon Looney. He's been on a rebounding tear.
14 rebounds in his last game.
Yep. And just the defense, the reliability, all of it. He's played in every game this year. It's just, it is underrated. And look, he's not a sexy player. He does sometimes have stone hands when it comes to catching passes. He does miss a few more bunnies than you'd like, but I'll take the good defense and the solid rebounding and the consistency of being on the court any day of the week.
Exactly. And I think looking at the last game, I mean, you had Curry with 40 and 7 threes. Funny enough, I actually saw a tweet from today. Someone predicted Curry would get 40 points and 7 threes right before the game started. Nice. Oh, I missed a point. That from our last discussion that I forgot to bring up. JTA in the dunk contest.
Woo!
Joel, I broke the news to Joel, and Joel freaked out. I wish we got that on camera. Joel, I want to hear your full thoughts on this because I told you to hold them.
I normally pride myself on being the best as far as being up to snuff on all this news. I've been sick. I've had classes today / just trying to recover. I saw Sam told me, he said JTA in the dunk contest. I'm like, wait, what? And then I Google it, and it's not wrong. Very exciting. Now, if you were to poll a Warrior fan and you'd say, we have one guy in the dunk contest, JTA would not be the first guy that comes to mind. Wiggins is too low key to do it, even though he's an incredible athlete and he's got an extreme burst.
Wiggins would be the best dunker in the dunk contest, but I don't think he would do it.
The one that I thought, if you were to say, would be Gary Payton II, because
absolutely
fan favorite. Even though JTA additional fan favorite, but Gary Payton, what is he most known for? His energy,
dunking,
his defense, and his dunks. JTA is just energy and defense. He's had some big dunks. His dunk over McGee was big this year.
Oh, that was insane.
Even though it was a blowout loss, he did have a very cool windmill fast break dunk against Sacramento last year that I just happens to come to mind. I think he's an underrated athlete, and I think it'll be fun to see what he can do, because clearly, if he has the confidence to go into the dunk contest, he clearly, I think, has a few dunks up his sleeve that he thinks could maybe not necessarily get him the win, but could at least get him some high scores. And that's all I want to see. I just want him to do well, because no one wants to go into the dunk contest and get embarrassed. He's not doing it just for the sake of doing it. He's doing it because he thinks he can put on a show. And I'm excited to see it because one of my favorites. I love him.
Exactly. Yeah, should be really fun to see him. I mean, from the Bay Area, Joel and I are both from the Bay. You know, he's practiced at our high school before with some of our guys on the team. So that's pretty cool to see a guy like that.
Yep.
Play right there.
Has interacted with him. I have it probably right here. Here we go. Yeah.
JTA jersey. Oh, there. Oh, that one.
Oh yeah,
ooh, that's a fantastic one. If you're listening to the audio version of that, which should come out, hopefully the audio will fix there. Just check out the YouTube page.
Yeah,
look at Joel's shirt. Pretty dope. It's gonna be at the end of the Warrior segment, so it'll be easy to find it. Yeah. But anyway, sorry for going out of order. I forgot to bring that up, and I meant to bring that up.
I would have brought it up. It's all good.
Exactly, it's all good. Just more apologizing to the viewers. We only got a minute left. We just talked about the Rockets game for a little bit. I just also want to highlight Jonathan Kuminga. His play recently has been a lot better, and you're starting to see why we picked him. And back on the Wiggins point, I mean, I know we're kind of jumping all around, but we traded D'Angelo Russell for Andrew Wiggins and Jonathan Kuminga. What a steal.
Bleacher Report always makes these lists of the top 10 or whatever worst trades. Look, D'Angelo Russell has been better this year I'm not as high on him as a lot of other guys are, but when you can get Jonathan Kuminga, so you get the 7th pick and you get Andrew Wiggins, who is unquestionably better than D'Angelo Russell. I don't want to hear
obviously.
that. You get the better marquee player, and you get a 19-year-old who has, I'm not going to say, no, yeah, he's got kind of unlimited potential. He's such a freak athlete. His shooting mechanics don't look bad. He's only 19. He's got a great coaching infrastructure and teammates to guide him. It's just, slam dunk of a trade.
Exactly, yeah. So I think overall the Warriors, Bob Myers does it again.
Yep.
It's that simple.
A great move.
When we come back here, guys, talking about Syracuse basketball for segment 3, moving from the NBA to college hoops, you will not want to miss out, so stay tuned. Welcome back, segment number 3 on episode 2 of the Corcoran Cap, talking about Syracuse basketball. It's been an interesting week for Syracuse basketball. I'm here to break it down. Sam Corcoran, your host, and as always with Zach Kopelman. Zach, how you doing this week?
I'm all right. Coming off a big win this weekend, so I can't be upset.
Yeah, big win indeed, and that's going to be the main point we're talking about. So this week, Syracuse played 2 games. The Pitt game, pretty ugly to say the least. I don't think we necessarily need to talk about it that much because let's talk about the more recent win. The Wake Forest game where Syracuse won 94-72, and boy, oh boy, what a turnaround for Syracuse. They barely lost to this team earlier in, I believe, Winston-Salem is where Wake Forest is, and now they come back to the Dome and absolutely obliterate the Demon Deacons. Let's start off with Buddy Boeheim, because Buddy Boeheim, 30 points, that's his ties for a career high. And I just want to start off this episode. If you guys watched last week, you saw that I was like, Buddy Boeheim, is he really the best Boeheim brother on this team? I don't know. Buddy definitely watched our last episode, our last segment, and he balled out. So, Buddy, I apologize to you. You are the better Boeheim, and you just proved that with the last game. Jimmy, you're good too, but your younger brother's a bit better. And, 30 points, just a fantastic offensive performance. Zach, what do you make of that?
Well, something I harped on last time we were on is just shooting consistently. And Buddy, this game shot 6 for 11 from 3. And that's what you need from your top scorer is a good shooting game. If you're a 3-point offense, if your best player is a 3-point shooter, you need good shooting. And that's what he came out and did.
Exactly. This team, it's been a shooting team recently. You have Gerard, you have Buddy Boeheim, Cole Swider, 3-point shooter. Jimmy Boeheim's a good stretch 4. And recently the 3-point shooting has not been doing so well for this team, especially in that starting 5. So definitely need to see that, especially from Buddy Boeheim, who's been very inconsistent this year. Speaking of the starting 5, I know Boeheim said after the game that he was very impressed with the starting 5. They exceeded his expectations, and they were just much more in sync this game. And I think you definitely saw that they forced 17 turnovers for Wake Forest, only had 4 turnovers for themselves, a game total of 5 turnovers. We'll talk about the guy who turned the ball over later, that last turnover. But overall, just a much more in-sync game for Syracuse. And you saw that. This team, I believe they're 50th in the nation in offense last I checked, somewhere around the 72-point mark, I believe. I don't have the actual stats up. But 94 points against a Wake Forest team that's been pretty damn good this year, that's insane. And that has to go. Credit to the starting 5 for that.
Big credit to the starting 5. I know we're going to touch on the defense a little bit later, but coming into the second half around the 10-minute mark, the 14-minute mark, Syracuse had about 7 steals in that stretch. So much better defensively, much better offensively. I know the shooting wasn't great all around, but Buddy obviously 6 for 11. Swider went 2 for 2 on threes and had quite a good game himself. The starters really had a much better performance today. Save Jim, didn't have his volume shooting games, and he did other things which really helped the team out. But yeah, the team offensively looked a lot better this week. Defensively, for the team that's 280th in defensive efficiency in the entire country, Syracuse played like one of the better teams defensively in the country.
Absolutely. And before we talk about the defense, because I know we're going to go pretty deep into this defensive discussion, do you think this is just a one-game performance from this starting five, or is this team really starting to get their stuff together, or is it too early to tell?
Really judging by the all-around performance, it might be a little too early to tell, but Wake Forest is really a good team this year. I know you had the defensive stats on them. I think they were the 13th or 17th in that range, that points scored this season. So they're a very high-scoring team, and we handled them well. And obviously, they have a good record, good team. Just on a more consistent basis against good teams like this, teams that are maybe on the edge of making the tournament, that will actually probably will make the tournament. We need all-around performances for the five starters, but good performances. And I think we could expect to see that a little bit more down the season. It's just all about, again, staying consistent, shooting well, which, it was mixed this game, but most of our players need to be on, especially in the starting lineup.
Exactly. And I'm looking at the stats right now. Wake Forest is, I believe, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. They're 12th in offense in total points scored in the entire nation. And actually, now that I look at it, the only other out of the conferences where you have big, I'm just looking at the big conferences, not a Power 5 is a football term, but you get the point. There's Power 5, Power 6, whatever it is. The only other team in those a big school conference is Purdue ahead of them. Then there's Wake Forest. If you saw time, they have more points
Purdue's
than
really one of the top 4 teams in the nation. So Wake Forest,
they are.
They're one of the better scoring teams out of the Power 6, out of your bigger conferences.
Exactly.
So really holding them to 70 points and still putting up the amount of points that you did against them. That's what we need to see on a more regular basis on this game.
Exactly. You have more points than Gonzaga, more points than Kentucky, more points than Auburn. Top-ranked Auburn, by the way. Baylor, Arkansas, UNC, Arizona, Duke. And then Syracuse is actually on that list down below. They're in the top 50. But still, the defense was absolutely stellar, in sync, this starting five. And I think you just got to give them credit. I do think it's a bit too early to tell, in my opinion, but that's a key game to have, to just cement yourself really and just go forward with that. I think that's a perfect way to get going, especially when you need to win games. Now, we talked about the defense a little bit, and I think personally, the defense was just insane. I think we already talked about a lot how Wake Forest is a 12th in the offense and total points scored in the nation. I think overall, this defensive performance was one of the best of the year for Syracuse, and now I think you have a really good chance to build on that defensive performance. You had the Pitt game this week where, first of all, your offense did not shine. Second of all, your defense did not shine against a pretty lackluster Pitt team, a team that you dominated at the Dome. Then you go there and just do not do well. Now you're going to NC State. NC State is, I think, 93rd in offense, in total offense. So
yeah, they're not top 50 for sure. They're a good team.
Yeah, they're not top 50.
They're not a good scoring team, particularly.
Exactly, yeah. So overall, I think you have, NC State, I think it's going to be a good game for Syracuse to test it out because you can really get going with that. After you have Louisville, probably a bit of a better team. But I think the next 4 games, you have NC State, you have Louisville, you have BC in that next 4 somewhere. I'm forgetting the other team we have. But it's pretty light in my opinion. Just looking ahead, it's a fairly light schedule for Syracuse these next 4 games. NC State should be a great way to kick it off. Hopefully you start with a stellar defensive performance.
Yeah, you really need to, whatever you did this past game against Wake Forest is what you really need to recreate. Obviously, Damian Williamson had a pretty good game, 27 points. But Alonzo Williams, who is Wake Forest's, he's their top scorer, 19, almost 20 points a game. Last time you played him, he scored 25 against you. The last few games, 20, 23, 19. One of the better scorers in the nation. And you hold him to 8 points. That is what you need to recreate, is hold the top player in check. Obviously, there are going to be other guys occasionally that go for big games, but you need to hold the guy who's really giving them production and force their secondary scorers to really step up.
Exactly. I think that's the key to this game. The NC State, so Syracuse, I believe, will be 500 if they win this game. And
yeah, I think we're 1 game under right now.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, the tournament, as we've been saying all year, it's looking very unlikely. But other than that, I think if you can still get that going, if you can win this game and start ramping it up and everything. So definitely a key game for Syracuse, as are all the games. Now, let's talk about another player who could be a lot more key in these next few games, who is not in the starting five, and that is Benny Williams. Benny Williams, obviously, he's been struggling throughout the year. Raw prospect, trying to just find his groove here. And let's talk about his game on Saturday. He looked a lot better. Now, the stats won't show it, but just on the court, he looked a lot more. I mean, so first of all, Boeheim on Friday said he had his best practice of the year. Second of all, on the court on Saturday, defensively contributed to that amazing defensive performance. On the offensive side of the ball, it looked like he knew where he was with the ball. He was moving around, making good passes, making just smart decisions. He did have that turnover, the fifth turnover that I mentioned earlier, but one turnover isn't going to hurt you too much, especially when you're going to win by 20-plus points. So
yeah, he's still a young player. He'll make mistakes like that, but it's good to see the growth for sure.
Definitely. And I think I just have two questions I want to answer real quick. So how much of a role do you think Benny Williams will have down the stretch? Personally, for me, I think he should have a similar role than he's had earlier, but it really depends on the starting five. I think you have to really stick with the starting five next game, obviously. That should be your game plan. They're coming off a good game. Keep the hot hands on the court and keep on going. So for now, I would say Benny Williams is going to have a very similar role to what he's been having all year.
Yeah, if I can kind of agree with that. When Benny comes in, he's either replacing Swider or Jimmy. Usually, the three of them don't usually play together. But a game like last game, he came in early and played a bit. He didn't play as much towards the end of the game, but he came in. I think he was the first sub, very confident. And despite not really scoring, he looked solid. So if one of your two starting forwards is not having the best game, or both of them actually, would probably be the best time to bring him in for extended minutes, because he's more consistently a good defender than both of them. Jimmy lacks defensively. Swider last game was good, has his games. So if you see one or both of your starting forwards struggling, that's when I would really put Benny in for extended minutes. He's good for stretches. Last game, he played an early stretch, looked great. I wouldn't say great, but he looked much improved, and those are the kind of minutes he needs to see towards the end of the season. Maybe a little bit more than 10. Feels like he played more than 10 last game, but bring him in for an extended period occasionally.
Exactly. And I think that's going to help leading into next season, playing him for that extended period, which leads to my next question. Where do you see Benny Williams on this team next year? I believe Boeheim said this week that you have 5 freshmen coming in. He said 2 or 3 of them should be starting. All of them should be getting playing time. And I think overall, Benny Williams is going to have a big role because you have Boeheim. Both Boeheim brothers are gone. You're going to have, I believe Swider is a senior. Am I correct by that, or am I wrong?
Yes, Swider is listed as a senior. I don't, with all the freaking COVID rules,
eligibility rules, it's hard. It's hard to figure that out.
But yeah, you're going to have Gerard returning, Torrance. But other than that, Benny is really the guy who is. I also think Edwards is returning, but Benny is the guy who has played the bench role, has been the highly touted recruit that's come in and not really played right away. And I think that could kind of be a mentor role for some of these guys that are going to come in next year and not necessarily play right away. I think Benny should be a starter next year and will be a starter next year. I have faith that he's going to look a lot better. He's probably going to be your best defender. So you play him in a more consistent role towards the end of the season. Hopefully he looks a little bit better. And next year, he's not going to be not even a 15-point a game scorer. Definitely not a 19, 20-point a game scorer. But if he can give you a solid 10, 11 points, a block, a steal, a few rebounds, he's going to be that all-around guy who makes your team better. And that's what you need him to be.
Exactly. And, he's been developing slowly this year, but these last few games, he's really showed why Syracuse brought him in and why he was considered to be in the starting lineup earlier in the season. So overall, I think he can carry that on and do pretty well. And now we have a few more minutes left. So let's move from basketball to football. And let's talk about something that happened yesterday, or it's going to be Monday. This video is coming out on Wednesday. The Syracuse football schedule. got released. And overall, I think this is a very good schedule for Syracuse. You look at their first 5 games. Let's look at the first 5 games. You have UConn, who is one of the worst FBS teams, and Wagner, who went 0-11 last year. And that's a school I've really never heard of. Louisville could be a tough game. Purdue could be a tough game. Virginia, you never really know. We do have Bradley and Ney, their former offensive coordinator, so they're probably going to know the team pretty well. The next 4 games, I mean, you have teams that finish as ranked opponents. Then you have Florida State, Wake Forest. So it's definitely a very rough end of the schedule. But overall, I think this team if this team can start off 5-0, which I think they can very much do, that would be insane. And I think that could very much happen.
Yeah, Syracuse, looking at the opponents originally before the schedule was set, I thought would have a very tough time next year. This actually puts me at ease a little bit more. Week 1 against Louisville, week 1 of college football, you never really know with that. But I think Mikhail Cunningham is coming back for another year. You never know with him. You never know.
He's been like that forever.
He's been their quarterback since I was probably an infant. But after that you have UConn, who, I mean, what can you say about UConn? They're not a great football team. Purdue, who I think is a beatable team, despite some great performances last year. But then UVA, bringing back Brennan Armstrong. Obviously, it's a new coaching staff in there, but Brennan Armstrong was one of the better quarterbacks in the ACC and in the NCAA last year. It's going to be a tough game. Ignoring the Wagner game, you're going to have NC State at home, though. I think they bring back Devin Leary, and that's a great team. I think they'll be pretty highly ranked by then. Clemson, I think, will bounce back. That's away. Notre Dame at home is going to be a tough game. Pitt at Pitt, they bring in Keaton Slavis, who has looked okay, but I really think, I mean, they're missing Mark Whipple, their former offensive coordinator. I think that's still going to be a very, very tough game. Home against Florida State might be a nice break, but at Wake Forest, at Boston College, this is still a very tough schedule. There's some really sneaky teams on here. Clemson can always come back. Notre Dame's always going to be tough, as I said. I could honestly see 3 wins next year. I could see 9 wins next year. It's really that.
You really don't know.
Yeah. With the new offensive staff, I'm interested to see how they use Tucker. I think week 1 will be a big show of how they play in ACC play later in the year. But really, depending on how this team looks in the all season, will be a big indicator on how they look going into next year. This is a tough schedule. I think we can manage it. We'll have to see.
Exactly. 7 home games as well, all of them with students in the section. Well, unfortunately, that's all the time we have to talk about Syracuse. Coming up, segment 4, we're moving from football and basketball to baseball, talking about the Oakland A's, talking about some free agent scenarios. You won't want to miss it. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Segment 4 on this second episode of the Corcoran Cap. Talking baseball now, talking about the Oakland Athletics. I'm your host, Sam Corcoran. Joining me, as always, Jake Hart. What's going on, Jake? How you doing? How's this week been for you?
Well, it's been interesting. Got the vid, but I'm back now, so I'm excited to do the pod.
Yeah, definitely rough week, but we're back here talking about the A's. I actually did not know you had COVID. I did not know that.
Yeah, it wasn't too exciting. It was a lot of movies and a lot of.
I totally get that. Yep, but. Anyways, we're back here talking about the A's. Last week, we talked about guys who could possibly be traded from this team. There's the trade market, and then there's the free agent market, which we're here to talk about today. So I say we started off with talking about the 3 guys who have already said that they've left the Oakland A's. They signed a contract somewhere else. Those 3 guys are 2 of these players I think played very key roles for the A's, Starling Marte and Mark Canha. Mark Canha, obviously a longtime Oakland Athletic. Starling Marte was the trade deadline target we wanted. We got him. He provided some pivotal moments for the Oakland A's during their playoff push, which ultimately failed. But you know what? Marte made his money's worth and got it from the New York Mets. So did Mark Canha. The other person is Yan Gomes, backup catcher. Just kind of he DH'd a few times, I believe, if I'm correct, but he wasn't too big of a part in this team, in my opinion. But he's on his way to Chicago, been a journeyman his full life, now going to be playing with the Chicago Cubs. So, Jake, first of all, what are your thoughts on these players leaving the Oakland Athletics? Were you expecting this? And yeah, just start with that. What are your thoughts on these players leaving?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough to see guys like this leave just because, especially at the end of the season after Laureano left and we had a couple, Olsen started slumping kind of near the end of the year. It felt like Marte and Canna and actually Gomes I felt was really good at the end of last season. It was like they were the only guys providing that spark in our lineup. So I don't know where that's going to come from. We'll discuss that a bit, but I definitely think they got their money's worth. And Canna, tough to see him leave, like hometown guy.
Yeah.
Well,
Kind of like Simeon.
But he had a great season 2 years ago, and he's kind of been on a downward trend as of late. He was a solid outfielder, nothing special. I think he's the type of guy that the A's produce a lot, actually. So replacing him is not a huge issue. He's a high on base percentage guy who average fielder, average power hitter. Like he wasn't providing anything outstanding. I know he was great against lefties, but I don't think his disappearance is going to be as heartfelt as maybe a Cespedes or a Donaldson was in the past.
Exactly. And I think the Starling Marte loss, even though he wasn't on this team for too long, I think that is a much, much bigger loss for the A's. Knowing the A's, whenever they make a trade deadline move when they're buying, you're kind of expecting the players to leave. But at the end of the day, Starling Marte is one of the best center fielders in baseball, in my opinion. Kind of proved himself last year with that. So definitely a massive loss and definitely a good pickup for the New York Mets. Personally, I think Canna leaving, I think he's a pretty replaceable player. As you said, Jake, he's declined a little bit over the past few years. It's definitely, he's been a pivotal part to this team. Definitely he's brought in a great culture here. And you could tell by his thank you tweets and his goodbye tweets and stuff like that he loved this team and he wanted to be here. And obviously it didn't work out, but you know what? He's going to do well in New York. I just know it. Yan Gomes, another trade deadline guy. He was brought in with Josh Harrison, helped a little bit, but I think that's one guy you're not really going to remember too much as an A. And plus you already have, he's a catcher. You already have Sean Murphy on this team. So overall, you have Tyler Soderstrom coming up in a few years. It's not going to be an urgent move, but I think overall, Yan Gomes is probably the least important out of these. And looking at this team right now, I think it's very hard to replace a lot of these guys, specifically Canna and Marte. You look at this outfield right now. Currently have Steven Piscotty, Tony Kemp, Chad Pinder, Seth Brown. Let's just talk about those four players. We talked about last week how Piscotty, Kemp, Pinder, and Brown could be guys that other teams are looking at as trade targets. Piscotty, his contract's kind of bad, which is why I think he'll probably stay. But Tony Kemp, Chad Pinder, if those are two guys who, if the A's want to be sellers, if the A's want to rebuild, they can get some good prospects for those two guys. Matter of fact, Tony Kemp also plays second base a lot, so the odds are you're not going to see him in the outfield every day. Seth Brown, he's been up in and out of the minors, been on the A's. He's been good. He's a fan favorite. You always love that. The other two guys aren't even worth talking about. Sky Bolt, Luis Barrera. I don't even know who Luis Barrera is. And Sky Bolt, Jake, you and I have had some discussions over Sky Bolt.
The worst player I've ever seen hit. It is hard to watch him hit. Barrera, he was a bit bigger of a prospect. I like him somewhat, but I don't think he's going to be this big, impactful player. I think out of the guys that you mentioned, I think Pinder and Brown probably have the biggest shot at stepping up into that everyday role. I think it's tough. We've seen Brown, and I'll pull up his splits right now, but him against they haven't really shown that they're willing to put him up against lefties. He only had 22 at bats against lefties this year versus 260 against righties, and he only hit 136. So I don't know if they're willing to take that step forward and put him in the lineup every day. He'd need to show something, but he does have pop. He hit 20 homers this season, so that's pretty solid. Mm-hmm. And for a rebuilding team to get a guy who's 26, 27, he could show his worth, and then we can flip him at the deadline because he's already 27, 28. He was a guy
something around there
came up. He was pretty old. As far as Pinder, I think Pinder's a guy who it just seems like in the big moments he never can get the hit. What is his bases loaded stats? He's like 1 for 30 or something.
Oh, he's terrible.
20 something strikeouts. Like the most unbelievable, like crazy stat you've ever seen. Pretty good fielder, got a cannon of an arm, can play basically anywhere. So he's going to be a guy who I think you're going to see get 500-600 at bats this season and pretty much be an everyday player depending on where he plays, especially if Chapman isn't on the roster anymore, because he does play third base. And if who's our big third base prospect? The guy who's coming up this year.
Oh God, what is his name? I'm blanking on it.
He's not like a huge prospect, but there's a guy who can play. But I think Pinder's definitely he's gonna have a spot. It's not like last year where it was kind of weird to get him in, especially against righties. I think he's gonna be out there basically on a daily basis.
Exactly. And I think you look at it's not that deep of a team the A's have right now, which is kind of hard. I know it's a rebuilding team, but you're gonna want some more solid guys coming in to fill in because I mean. All these guys, as Jake, you said, are kind of question marks. You kind of know what to expect of them in some moments. There's not really, when you look at those guys, I don't think nothing screams everyday player for you. In my opinion, you've never really seen these guys be everyday players. So personally, I think you're going to have to add some guys. Now, before we talk about guys we add, I mean, I might as well just touch on Yan Gomes' replacement. We'll find a backup catcher somewhere. Sean Murphy's an everyday player. Preferably, I mean, Murphy's a righty, I believe. Maybe get a lefty catcher who can hit someone who can hit lefty. Yeah, is what I'm thinking.
It's kind of tough. We had a guy in that, Jonah Heim, who I don't know if you know, he got traded to the Rangers in that.
He did.
Sanders
trade. Who was the guy last year? Garcia. That was the other guy.
Garcia and Austin Allen have not shown me anything. I don't know. I think
exactly.
Austin Allen is on the current roster right now. Might be mistaken.
Austin Allen is not on the current roster. Neither is Garcia, according to the.
Yeah, it's going to be someone who earns it in camp. No one's won the job yet. And yeah, I think if they can provide a glove or can hit somewhat against right-handed pitchers, they're going to make it. But I think Murphy's going to see a big uptick, maybe see him in that 130 game range instead of what he played like 110 this season.
Yeah, he'll probably get a bit more games this year is from what I'm thinking. I mean, he was one of our young prospects that we've been developing for a while now. So you're gonna want to get those games up for him, in my opinion, if you want to reach his full potential. And speaking of other A's free agents, there's still a ton on the market for the Oakland A's. So just to name a few notable guys, a lot of it comes in our bullpen and our starting, or mainly our bullpen. But there's one starter out there that rang a bell. That was Mike Fiers. You have Jake Dietman, Yusmeiro Petit, not Tony Romo, excuse me, Sergio Romo. Andrew Chafin, who we traded for at the deadline. Birch Smith is another guy. You have Jed Lowry and Josh Harrison are two other guys. Mitch Moreland's another one that stands out. Do you think any of these guys, Jake, are going to come back to Oakland? Looking at those guys, I know there's some other guys I did not mention. Oh, Trevor Rosenthal's another guy. I don't think he's coming back due to the surgery. He didn't really do much last year. Didn't really play at all. But other than that, do you think any of those guys are going to come back to Oakland, or are they looking for new homes?
Well, is Chafin gone? I didn't realize that.
He is not signed yet. No.
Oh, okay. Out of those guys, I think we have a good shot. I mean, basically, I think you're going to see at most 1-year deals or maybe really cheap 2-year deals with maybe a team option. But Lowry, I think you can definitely see coming back on a vet min. Just if
Lowry only, I mean, it's Jed Lowry. He only does well with the A's. So yeah. I think that's one guy I think you can bank on staying as well. But I'll let you finish.
And then, I mean, Petit and Fiers seem like guys who, no matter how well they play, they're not exciting enough. They don't throw hard enough for other teams to like put their foot forward and really pay them. Where I feel like if you have a guy like Diekman who's shown that he can be dominant against lefties out of the pen, or Romo who really, I mean, he was pretty good after that rocky start. And then obviously I don't think we're getting Harrison. Harrison's going to get paid.
He should get paid.
I know
somewhere else
7, but he's going to get like a 1-year $6-7 million deal somewhere to play utility. So I could see those guys coming back. I don't know enough about our bullpen minor league situation. I assume we're probably just going to get Petit or
we'll probably get one of those guys back. I think Diekman could get paid a little bit more than we're willing to pay him somewhere else.
Yeah, lefty specialists are other
They're
teams.
rare.
Yeah. I mean, starting rotation wise, it's interesting because we have we have Dalton Jeffries, we have
Currently our rotation it looks like Chris
Capellian.
Bassett, Cole Overton, Sean Mania. This is on the 40-man roster. So most of our rotation is still back. Chris Bassett, Cole Overton, Sean Mania, Frankie Montas, James Capellian, Dalton Jeffries, and Paul Blackburn. So those are 7 guys. You're probably looking at a 5-man rotation. Some of those guys could get traded, in my opinion. I know we talked about Bassett and Mania being trade targets, maybe Montas as well. But other than that, I think you definitely could. I think Mike Fiers, I highly doubt we bring him back. Personally, I think some team could overpay for him. He's done pretty decent here, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I think the guys that you should expect to see in the rotation next year is definitely Capellian, definitely Irvin, and I think they're gonna leave. They're gonna trade everyone else except. I mean, I think they're only gonna keep 1, maybe 2 of Montas, Mania, Bassett, but I really think only 1's staying. And I think they're going to leave a spot open for whoever steps up out of Jeffries or Puck out of the pen, kind of do whoever's like riding the hot hand on who's going to start. And then they want a headliner, probably Montas, just because he's got 2 years left instead of 1.
Definitely.
But nothing too exciting. The A's haven't had a true ace shutdown starter. I mean,
I think the last one was Sonny Gray, really.
And I mean, even that is debatable. Like, he was solid.
I mean, he was 3rd in Cy Young voting that one year.
Yeah.
But other than that, you're not really looking at much. When we only have 2 minutes left, and I want to bring up one more topic. Obviously, free agency guys leave. Guys are going to come in. And I want to ask, who are some guys that you think you can help bring in, help the cause out a little bit? I looked at outfielders really because I think the outfield is where we lack the most. And I looked at 5 veteran guys, because that's usually what the A's bring in. They usually bring in veteran guys, not really looking at a big money guy. So it's just some cheap veterans. 5 guys I saw: Andrew McCutchen. He's kind of in his last days. Could pay him a little bit. It shouldn't be too expensive, in my opinion. Dexter Fowler's another one in his final days. John Jay. Those are 3 guys in their final days. A bit younger guys on the younger side, Jake Marisnick and Steven Souza, I think they could pay for. Those, I mean, they're all kind of pricey options, those last 2. But I think other than that, I think you can probably bring one of those guys in, fill a hole, whether it be center field, left field, right field. Just overall, it would be a good outfield boost for the A's.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to predict these things when you know they're not going to spend money and big names somewhat unlikely. I think they're going to give a lot of young guys the benefit of the doubt and the chance to start the season just because they've got basically nothing to lose. But yeah, we're going to see a couple of maybe backup potential guys, especially if we don't end up trading guys like Piscotty and Andrus.
Exactly. And you're also not, I was just going to say, you're also not going to see like all of these 5 guys be signed. You're probably looking at 1 veteran, maybe none. If Piscotty stays or Andrew stays, you're probably like, I like that point a lot because you're going to want to give the young guys opportunity. It's rebuilding time. You're not going to sign old veterans, too many old veterans to rebuild. Just have a few on the roster, help them guide the way.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I always liked like Brett Gardner. He's a guy who I could see. I mean, I don't know. He might retire. He's what?
He's very old. He's been in the league forever.
But I mean, I don't know. It's tough to say just because you don't know how people are perceived. But I know the A's do love Nelson Cruz. I've tried to get him many times in the past to no avail. Probably far too expensive. But
oh yeah,
I mean, you've seen the A's do surprising things in the past, especially with like looking at that Billy Butler contract. What 5-6 years?
That was ridiculous. Oh my goodness.
But
so you never know.
Yeah, you never know. I mean, anything you could see them doing where the player could have value at the trade deadline. Really, that's the only reason to get a veteran other than just filling up the roster. If they're not trying to win right now, which if they trade Chapman and Olsen like we talked about, seems
exactly. Definitely. Lots of free agent frenzy going on. There was before the lockout and hopefully after the lockout, these guys will come here. We'll be able to bring this up when they sign guys or they lose guys, whatever it is. But anyways, guys, that is going to do it for episode 2 of the Corcoran Cap. Great having you on, Jake. As always, guys, make sure to follow the guys on Twitter. You have Rohit, Joel, Zach, Jake still Twitterless after week 2. Let's get on that, bud.
I'll get there.
There you go. But anyways, guys, that will do it. And I will see you guys next week. Peace.